Sometimes a nation such as China, CCP, have to come to terms with the limitation they place upon their citizens that makes them afraid of speaking freely, and hence they jailed, as is told, they jailed some people for speaking about coronavirus rather than acting on it positively straight away. They acted negatively and regressively, which is very, very standard fare, absolutely standard fare by all Marxist-dominated mindsets. Now, the Chinese are progressing, no doubt, technically and engineering and all that sort of thing in the most phenomenal manner, but they're not necessarily progressing in a cultural manner in any real sense if they're afraid, if the leaders are afraid of the people speaking out on very practical matters. It wasn't a criticism of the government to say there's a virus. That is not a criticism of a government. But it's also a sort of parallel, in a way, of the Marxist mindset in the West, which is in the left, that if you criticize the idea that we're doing something about climate change, they don't think about and try to understand what you're trying to say mathematically or scientifically. They attack you personally for having the affront to dare question their authority. And so therefore you can see that all other authoritarian regimes which the left are now, they didn't used to be, but they've transmutated, if you like, into some feminist, Nazi, wherever it is, that's hardly recognisable as a leftist opposition that we all used to vote for and love. We can't do that anymore because they've turned basically against the very people that used to be the voter base and now have collected amongst itself a very small minority of people that it's recruited through PC, that really most of them aren't educated enough to actually understand what's actually going on. This is related to China. I just want to show the parallels in the Chinese CCP, which has a limitation on what people can say, and it fears, and everyone lives in fear of speaking out in China, even when it's something as important as a virus that can spread throughout the world and cause a pandemic and crash the Chinese economy. Now, this is sort of a karma in a way that the Chinese are happening. It's a sort of a karma in a way that they have to come to terms with, that they having a fear of speaking out on something which is practical, just a simple practical matter of a disease, and having a fear of that, or someone in authority or position of power reacting to someone speaking like that because it might threaten the economy, has now caused a far greater effect upon the economy and the whole world's economy by not acting to nip this thing in the bud as early as possible. In other words, when someone says something, oh, right, there's a virus here, we've got a problem, instead of locking them up, you say, okay, immediately the positive thing to do in a place what was more open-minded about what was said would be to react straight away and act upon the problem rather than react upon the person who mentions the problem. The other thing about the Chinese, which I find as a little bit hypocritical, and I love the Chinese people, I spent a year there, and I have a great deal of sympathy at the moment with all the friends and the students that I met in China, and I've loved, dearly loved, and it was reciprocal, and I really feel, I hope all of them are all safe. But I feel, well, I really like the Chinese people, but I feel that the CCP has got a mindset. He wants to dominate the world, and he does it be a bit bolshy. He wants to be a bit bossy, if you like, in its dealings because he's got the economic power and stuff like that. He doesn't see everyone as equal partners. He takes advantage of them through discovering the weaknesses in the Australian system, the government system, whatever, a weakness in individuals, taking advantage of them to then do deals which are to the Chinese economic benefit. All well and good, it's all business. It's all just business. It's all plainly business. There's not much spirit or soul towards humanity there. You might think with a long-term goal, all better run the Chinese way, but obviously not. Obviously not. This coronavirus outbreak has proven that the Chinese way has got a limitation. It's proven it. And the fact that the UK has voted to be out of some sort of dictatorship, which is the UU, another reactionary left-wing force, and that's what it is, cronyism, nepotism, whatever goes on there, and undoubtedly a lot of corruption, proves that a free-thinking people can make their own mind up if they've got the education to do so. And then basic thing, the premise about any nation, if China, whatever, is that the people are law-abiding. It doesn't matter if they criticise a government so much, as long as they don't break the laws. There's no, if the law says you can't criticise a government, then basically it's like a prison camp. It's just one big concentration camp. If you can offer criticisms about this, that, and the other, and speak freely on that behalf, in a polite, and I mean in a polite and intellectual sense, I don't mean raving idiots like you get in the West, which is, I find that regrettable, actually. But nonetheless, it's something that China needs to learn to have a conversation without fear of being personally intimidated by actually speaking one's mind on things that are important, like the progress of society in a practical and positive sense. The other thing about China that I find a bit odd, because it's a very attractive place to live. It's an extremely attractive place to live. I love living in China, and I make no bones about it at all. I was there for a year. I did not want to leave. I fell in love with the place. But it didn't want me there. You have to go, where you go. But it doesn't mind pushing millions of its own people into Australia, or hundreds of thousands of them, in its sort of colonization, if you like, through the real estate they can afford and all that, which has inflated the price of our real estate. They don't mind doing that. And that's cynicism. That's straight out cynicism. That's not treating people as equally. It's like thinking you're superior. But it actually shows an inferior mind. It shows a superior in a way of having muscle, but it's not necessarily superior as in way of intelligence, unless you're just spreading your own culture, and it's just purely organic and biological, which it actually is. And that's all it is, an evolutionary process rather than a social process or a political process. It's actually an evolutionary process. Nonetheless, if the Chinese, the CCP, were genuine, more open-hearted, more understanding, then they would allow cross-migration. They would allow white people to go and live in China and live there and become citizens. Instead of, you cannot become a citizen of China, but nonetheless, you can become, a Chinese person can become a citizen of Australia, but it's still more or less owned lock, stock and barrel by the Chinese, by the CCP. They still want to control the minds of the people who've migrated to Australia. Even though they've become Australian citizens, they're still basically seen as under the control of the Chinese mindset, which is really pretty scary when you think about it, because you've got some centralised control system. It's like a queen bee or something like that, or queen ant wants to control all the other ants like their cells of one body. And I think the Chinese, as yet, brilliant brains they are, they've no doubt about it. They have fabulous brains, I've no doubt, brilliant people, no doubt. Just to learn the Chinese language alone is a fabulous thing to do. Nonetheless, can learn a little bit from the British. Arrogant, that's my saying. But learn a little bit about respecting the law, respecting each other, and respecting the freedom of speech and dealing with people's ability to speak freely, regardless it may confront you as a government. If you as a government cannot accept a bit of criticism from the people, then the government itself is immature and does not see itself as having the intellectual authority, even though it may have the legal authority or the authority by coercion or whatever, or the threat of jail, it is still as yet an immature government. It's an immature system that cannot take criticism or is afraid of people expressing themselves, so they jail them and fine them in one way or another for doing so. I hope the Chinese and CCP in particular take note of this, because it's done in the greatest of respect for them. This is not against or for China. This is for humanity. Thank you.